Hey, my friends. There we go. It says I have 15 minutes to make a video, so that should be just about right. It is 15 minutes of free thinking after all. So, hope everyone is doing well today. It's Sunday school with Carpo here, although it's Monday today because on Sunday it was my son's birthday party yesterday. He turned 8 last week and we had his birthday party yesterday. Had some people over, played some traditional games, pin the tail on the donkey, set up a piñata, um, and it was nice. But we're in the age of COVID, so it was interesting because I don't know how many people to have over. I don't know who to invite, who feels comfortable, who doesn't feel comfortable. The last time my friend came over with his 2 kids, I straight up said I hadn't seen him in months, and I said, I don't know what your deal or what your feelings are on COVID and masks and whatnot. And just straight out, and he's like, oh, whatever. And we gave each other a hug, right? You know, you have to be able to cover these things before, so you know how people feel. And I know a lot of folks out there just say, oh, screw it, I don't care about COVID. And I've heard enough of that. That's fine. If you're selfish enough to just not care about anyone else's health, and you know, it's kind of like if you can even prevent harming someone else. It's the idea, well, I can drink and drive. That's the kind of mentality I've heard from people. Oh, I'm a good driver when I'm drunk, you know. Hey, man, everybody takes chances. You know, nobody wants to get sick. But it gets into this debate about how bad this virus is, and it's just ridiculous. Really, I've talked about this a couple times, the long-term potential with COVID for, you know, organ damage, or the long haulers who have, you know, serious mental issues, and that it might enter the spine, and it might actually enter the brain stem, as some people believe, and affect breathing in that way. We just don't know. And so the point being, I'm not here to talk about COVID, but rather say that for a lot of people it is scary. So when you have a party or you're doing something, you just don't know who's okay with it. A couple of the kids that came, they were neighbors, and they wore masks, and we were totally cool with that. It's like, I wanted to, and it was like kind of at this, you know, that's one of those questions we ask, I guess. So, I really wanted to talk a little bit about COVID and how it's affecting us all. First of all, our psyche, of course, people are just losing it on a lot of fronts. But a lot of people are coming together and helping one another. There's a lot of social upbringing and helping one another. And this is because the government has always fallen flat when there's a serious crisis. In fact, the United States government has always been incompetent on so many fronts. I mean, I watched an interview earlier that was from a long time ago with Carl Sagan. If I'm not mistaken, it was an interview by Ted Turner. And he asked him, are you a socialist? And he said, well, you know, America ranks 19th in infant mortality. And he's like, that means that, you know, 20 countries basically care more about their babies than we do. And you know, that was like 40, 50 years ago when that interview took place. So you're like, wow, how bad is it now? And we know how bad the education system is in America and all these different things. So when COVID came along, it's not that it made things worse. It just revealed the true weakness we have. It'll bring up something completely random here. Change. The big change shortage you've heard about, maybe. People have said that there's a shortage of change out there, that there's not enough coins, literally. So therefore, in a lot of stores, you hear these Karens who are complaining because they didn't get their 12 cents in change or their 50 cents in change. And a lot of stores have signs up, there is no change, we round up or down. It's become an issue of contention for a lot of people. And therefore, people are just more than happy to use their debit cards, if possible, right? And in fact, in 2018, from what I read, 174 billion in sales were done through credit card transactions, which was 30 billion up, which is almost 20% from the 3 years before in 2015. A lot more, and that was back then. A lot more people are using cards to buy things, and I've always had this kind of grind my teeth thinking about a cashless society. For a lot of people, it's convenient. You know, oh, you just scan. In fact, in other European countries, it's even easier. It's just a tap and go in a lot of places. And more people use them over there. I think up to double in a lot of European places. But in America, still a lot of people use cash. And one of the things people don't realize is 8% of people have no bank account and have no access to a bank account. And 18% of Americans rely on check cashing services. That's a lot of people, okay, of the working class. So we have people who can't bank the way everyone else can and have to pay higher fees. And the thing people don't realize is, as a merchant, you pay 3 or 4% to use a credit card or run a credit card, which is why in smaller places you see a sign that says, we charge a 50-cent per transaction, 50 cents if you don't purchase at least $5 worth of stuff. So you end up buying more stuff because they do pay a minimum fee, and it sucks. I can't take credit cards for my business because they won't even work with herb vendors of certain states. But not only that, but they just charge too damn much, and it's a high risk fee for certain vendors. So I don't want to get into all that cost, but basically they're trying to move us to a cashless society, and they have been for a long time. And COVID is being used as a way to get there. Groups, I don't know, other payment methods like PayPal, Venmo, things like that. People love the convenience, but yeah, it costs a vendor. When you're paying 3 or 4% of your total income back to these agencies just to use money that's your money, it becomes preposterous, and then people get locked into it. So if you're not able to use it and you get forced out of a cashless society without a bank account, you get kind of screwed. And COVID is making that harder for a lot of people, especially with not being able to get out and buy things, not being able to go to certain stores or certain banks. So it's a tough one. And there's also a privacy issue with cash, And so I'm going to move on beyond cash. I kind of wanted to talk about a few different things regarding COVID-19 because it's such a rough time for so many people right now. And finding who we are is so difficult enough in our day-to-day life when everything's going normal and everything's fine. But it's a lifelong path. We're continuously searching to find out who we are, right, and discover ourselves. And we can't always look at the big picture. Sometimes we can't think deeply all the time and be obsessed with it. I learned the hard way that you just can't always be in deep thought, right? I mean, you have to just live your life. But what happens when we kind of have time to reflect as a society on who we are? When we have 180 nations that are all reeling from the same financial woes because of a pandemic which is wreaking havoc around the world. And I know there's still a portion of the population who are completely in denial that this is an issue, but there always will be. I mean, I'm utterly convinced that if a meteor struck, and took out an entire European country, then when the big cloud of dust headed over here, people would say, oh, it's, NASA created that, it's not real. I mean, there are always going to be people who don't believe things. That's just how that is. I mean, you can't try to force a portion of the population to believe that reality is actually real. And you know what? It's because we don't really know. There is no evidence that you can prove anything to anyone at this point. It comes back to that old, I think, therefore I am, and all I know is that I have a brain, or not even that I have a brain, but that I am a thinking entity of some sort, right? So, as we move through this, and through our lives, we try on new ideas. We try on new communities. We try on new ideals. We try on new images. We try to find out who we are, as I'm saying, discovering ourselves. And we find that the best way to interact is through good community and good people. And I've met a lot of bad people, just like we all have. I haven't spent a lot of time around them because I learned young that they'll bring you down with them. There's some real shitty people out there, but the values that I've learned in my life have taught me that you always have to be in somewhat deep thought about what you want out of life. I mean, like, for example, material things don't mean a whole lot to me, but I have to have material things to survive, right? And, truth is important to me. It really is. But truth is subjective also. I realize this. Not that it's anything that needs to be proven or disproven, just that people will believe what they want to believe. And this is something that's become more apparent than ever in the last few years. So when you do stand up for your own truth, that little sliver that you know must be a fact, right? It can be painful. You know, a lot of us like to think we're independent thinkers, but really all of your independent thinking is based on what you've read, what you've heard, what you've researched. All of us have. And we choose what we focus on. We choose what we gravitate towards. And it's a lot easier to follow somebody else. And because of that, there's going to be little mistakes within that system, that paradigm. For example, a religion. You say, this sounds good to me, and then you start, say trying to practice a religion, and then over time you find out that there are certain parts of it that don't agree with you. So you say, well, maybe I'll discount these parts, but you find those around you say, no, you have to believe all of it or else you're a heretic, right? The same thing happens with the military if you don't follow every instruction. The same thing happens with even Flat Earth Society group. You know, these groups that gravitate towards certain conspiracy theories, all different types of things, where if you're not 100% on board with everything the group believes, then you're just not one of us, you know. And people are so desperate to become a member of a community that they shift their values or what they're willing to believe in order to accommodate other people so they feel more safe within their group. This happens in politics. It happens everywhere. And, just go with the flow, right? But that's going with the group sometimes. So during this time right now, it's more important than ever to gravitate towards good people. And it's harder than ever to find good people because there are plenty of great people out there, but as we get older, we find it's harder to find people we relate to as individuals. And I'm not attracted to, say, hanging out with businessmen or people who wear suits and ties and go work in an office and all that matters to them is the stock market, or that talk about money or are obsessed with, money's a major... Money... It's funny because somebody accused me of talking about money too much the other day. I thought it was really funny because I'm like, dude, just because you mention it doesn't mean that you're obsessed with it, right? I hate money. I would totally rather not deal with it. But I remember going through this stage in my life where I said, money means nothing. And I said, no, it's an exchange. It's a matter of exchange for labor. Something that we used to trade grain for, some food, other food, or, give somebody shelter for some food, or an animal skin, whatever it might be. When you don't have what you need, you write down a note, say, I'll give it to you next spring, and that's a promissory note. That's what cash was based on. Just because the systems failed doesn't mean that cash itself is the enemy, right? In the COVID economy, it's like, I don't know, it's a completely different world out there. Like, businesses are much more concerned with them surviving as far as this whole stock market idea that, screw it, people. Get your asses back to work so we can make money for the man, right? And it's silly. It's like, how much is enough? How much progress is enough? And so anyway, I don't know. Are we nudging society towards a utopia, or are we nudging society towards a dystopia? I guess it's all based on perspective, and that's based on experience or expectations. And a lot of the times it's fear of loss of control over one's own life that leads one to want to control other people's lives. And so it's a crazy world out there. I guess it's like I thought popped into my mind earlier that I've heard people say, like, let go, let God, or something. And I thought, well, that could go without even having a religion. Just basically it's just going with the flow, letting things roll, seeing what happens. And it's a matter of a balance of knowing when to act and just when to let things go. There's nothing we can do right now to stop the COVID issue, so we just kind of have to go with the flow. We can complain, we can argue, we can say it's unfair, but that's just life. And I think our character as individuals is going to be judged long term by how we interact with one another right now. In other words, I think that a lot of people are using the current crises as a free ticket to allow them to treat other people like shit and call them idiots and sheeple and say, you guys are just dumb, COVID's a fraud, it's a hoax, and just make other people feel like they're the idiots for actually taking it seriously. I think history won't favor those people. I think history will favor those who actually looked upon one another and cared about one another. You can look down in history, and in 1918, during the Spanish flu, there were anti-mask leagues that were protesting in the streets, demanding an end to the forced wearing of masks because it infringed on their civil rights. And that second winter was pretty nasty. Eventually, they overcame it. But looking back, we shake our heads and say, we've come further than that. We can do better. And the whole point is that we all want our economy back. We all want our lives back. We all want some form of normalcy, which we can only do with cooperation right now, regardless of how we feel or how we think that we know better than the scientists, epidemiologists, virologists,